You can know a whole lot about something. That's great. It has little to nothing to do with how good of a leader you're going to be. There are leadership competencies, and those were the ones that I am expert in assessing. I wasn't always that impressed. And then I met somebody who really impressed me, and I thought, well, what did he have?
And so therefore, they interview people, but they don't really interview people.
They're not asking competency-based questions, Vernā. And this is what I was telling these people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sundays with Vernā. We have with us today a really fabulous colleague, Ginny Clarke, and she's going to be talking about conscious leadership. So let me tell you a little bit about Ginny before you hear her brilliance, because I think you will feel the same way I do about Ginny, which is that she is so clear and so brilliant that she makes things that seem complex to a lot of people. She just gets right at it. She's like right direct, and it comes from a lot of experience. So let me tell you a little bit about Ginny. In a world that demands agility and conscious decision making, Ginny Clarke stands as a beacon of innovative leadership. With her wealth of experience from executive roles such as in Google to becoming a leading authority in diversity and talent strategy, Ginny has been a guiding force for leaders seeking to create workplaces that are not just diverse, but truly conscious and connected. Her holistic 5 dimensions of conscious leadership, which we're going to hear later about specifically, are more than just principles. They are practices that have reshaped how organizations approach talent and culture in a transformative era. As we look to navigate the uncertainties of today's workplace, Ginny's insights are invaluable for leaders aiming to foster accountability and trust, integrity, and inclusion. She offers not just a vision, but practical strategies to thrive in the face of disruption and to lead with true sense of purpose, with a true sense of purpose. Welcome to Sundays with Vernā, Ginny.
Vernā, thank you so much. It's so great to be with you. We've been around each other for decades, my dear, and this is one of the few times that we've come together. So I'm
I
really glad.
know. I
Yeah.
know. Although I love watching you. When we finally caught up, I was like, Ginny, I just want to hear about all the ways that you are producing this fabulous content because, I see a lot of stuff and I don't necessarily feel that way about all the stuff that I see, but I love so much of what you're saying and what you are doing. So I am thrilled that our listeners get to hear from you. I know you have a podcast of your own, so you have to tell us where to find you as well. But I just wanted to start off by saying there's so many words in your bio that just resonate with me. The whole idea of consciousness and connection and innovation and transformation, like all of those, and also both principles and practices. They just make me get excited,
All
right?
right.
Because
Yeah.
these are the things that we've often missed and in the ways that we've been doing some of this work. So, I just want to start off by asking you, like, you've obviously excelled in many various roles throughout your career. So can you give us a little play by play of like your career
Sure.
path and how you are now where you are?
Certainly. Yeah. I'll try to keep it short because it's a lot of years. Originally from Southern California, I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I went to University of California, Davis as an animal science major, graduated as a French and linguistics major. Makes perfect sense. Worked for a couple years as a college recruiter for the University of California, moved to Chicago to go to business school at Kellogg, Northwestern's business program. Loved it, was on the admissions committee there. Went into, I actually majored in accounting and finance. Now, you kind of thinking, how does her mind work that she goes from wanting to be a vet to studying language to now accounting and finance? Consider this. The study of language and linguistics is about a system. I'm a systems thinker. I figured this out as I started, kind of putting pieces together and leaning into what really attracted me, and I don't think a lot of people allow themselves to do that. But I because I have this liberal arts degree, you don't even hear that term anymore. I was very conscious even then of what I wanted to do. My choices. So fast forward, Kellogg was great. First job at First National Bank Chicago. It's now Chase. It was a great place to start. There are a whole lot of folks, whole lot of Black folks, MBA types in Chicago. It's a great city. Um, I got exposed to commercial real estate. I networked my way into what's now called JLL. It was known as LaSalle Partners back in the day. Was there for about 4 years, and then moved on to Prudential Real Estate Investors for another 5 years. Shortly after that, I left. Well, yeah, it was during that time my father passed away, and that was a defining moment for me because a couple things happened. One, I decided I didn't want to be in the real estate business anymore. The second thing was that I knew that I needed to find purpose and grounding. My mother was still with us, and I was very close to her, but it just was. It was the most unsettling, devastating thing that had ever happened. And I was introduced to a healer shortly after my dad died, and he opened my world to spirituality. So put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. Um,
I know. I was like, "I don't know this story, but this makes a lot of sense."
yeah,
Okay, keep going.
yeah. So it was during my time at Prue, and after my dad passed, that I said, "What is it that I've always loved doing?" And I wrote in my book, Career Mapping, that came out in 2011, that I had left breadcrumbs for myself. So I reflected back on the fact that I'd been a college recruiter. I always loved interviewing people. I was really good at it. I could see into people. I connected. I assessed well. I had good instincts. I was on the admissions committee at Kellogg too, similar kind of thing around assessment. And I thought, I want to be an executive recruiter. Now, I didn't know everything that that meant, but I set about meeting people, and it took a year and a half, but I networked my way into Spencer Stewart, one of the world's largest executive search firms. And I was there for 12 years, and I became a partner there and co-founded, led their global diversity practice, yada yada, a bunch of other stuff. But it was, I don't mean to, that was the turning point. And that, if there was one part of my career that was the most formative in who I am today, it was that, because they were methodical. People don't realize that the big search firms, there was a Mr. Spencer Stewart, a Mr. Korn, Mr. Ferry, Mr. Heydrich, Mr. Struggles, and there are a few other big ones. All these men were management consultants, and they created these firms. Are 75, 80 years old, but back in the day, they figured they could be intermediaries and connect the CEOs of their client companies across different organizations. Executive
Right.
recruiting was born. The relevance of that is the way I learned the business was based on that. You start by understanding what is the business need, and let that inform the talent need, what you're looking for. So
Yeah.
there's that. We can come back to that. I left Spencer Stewart after 12 years to write this book, Career Mapping, because I really wanted. I remember looking down on the plaza of the Equitable Building on Michigan Avenue and the river, and thinking, man, I'm in this big office. I was breathing rarefied air, and I thought, especially for Black people, I wanted to be able to give them some of what I learned from being in these halls for 12 years. So I went off. I had been married, divorced, have a son who's now 28, and I decided to leave to write the book. And I did consulting for a few years. I went back to another firm for a couple of years, and that firm sold. So I was on my own for a couple of months, and Google called and asked me to come join them in there. They had just spun off executive recruiting from the general talent acquisition organization. So that kind of almost brings us up to today. Fast forward there, plenty to talk about. Almost 5 years at Google. I started doing diversity stuff. That's what they wanted me to focus on when I got there, and then asked me to create an internal mobility program. And I took over a team of non-tech recruiters. So I had 3 concurrent teams. I had about 30 people reporting to me, which was great. I learned a ton, and it shaped so much of what I'm talking about today. So I
Yeah.
left in 2020. I started speaking in early 2021 and moved back to Chicago because I had left Chicago to go to Silicon Valley to work for them, which was great because I got to be closer to my son, my home state, other family members. But Chicago called me back because this is where my tribe is, and I really wanted to be close to a number of people. And so it's been tremendous. And the awakening has been profound because speaking has allowed me to integrate a lot of the things that have been percolating all of these years that you don't necessarily stitch together for your own benefit. So I know
Yeah.
that was a long intro, but hopefully,
No, that was beautiful because I'm sure first of all, I totally, I hear you when you are saying basically that you learn different things over time in different roles, and you're always trying to kind of bring it together,
Mhm.
connect it. And the thing, I think the thread for folks who are looking for true fulfillment and service is purpose, right? You're always looking for what am I here for? Like,
Why?
what's the best use of me? Like when I said to people like, well, I quit the law because it was clear that it wasn't the best use of me, right? It might be perfect for someone
Mhm.
else, but you're constantly trying to listen to what everything is telling you
Mhm.
about how to use what you've been given and how to use it in the service of others. So I'm right there with you, and I think the upside of having a longer career is that you have these insights.
Yes, huge.
So share with us just like, I don't know, 2 or 3 insights
Yeah,
where you're sitting right now, because you said, "As I speak, I start things start to even come together even
yeah,
more, cohesively."
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and that's a function, I think, of the fact that I always had this facility with language. I have a good ear. I hear, and I say to people that part of my ability has always been I hear what you didn't say. I have that insight. Call it intuition. It's gotten better and more honed as I continued my spiritual practice. But I think a couple things, a couple points in my career. One, in getting to Spencer Stewart, I joined um, right before I joined in May of '97. My mother passed in June. My son
Mm.
was one. 6 months later, I asked my husband for a divorce. So I had gone through a huge period of transition. That one of those things could throw somebody off. I had like four of them at once. Um, and I decided at that point, because I had been working with this healer guru therapist scholar. I mean, he's all those things. Um, I knew that I didn't want to segregate and compartmentalize my work from who I am. And
I really love that you said that.
yeah, yeah.
It may even bear repeating,
Yeah,
Ginny.
yeah, I didn't wanna segregate and separate my work from who I am. And that's really the essence of conscious leadership. I named it more recently, but for me, it was a survival tactic, strategy, principle even. So, that was important because I set boundaries around my life. I said to the head of the office, "Look, I've got a two-year-old, and I'm not going to be here at 6:30 in the morning like other people are. I've been up since 4, but I won't get here until 8. So, that's when the nanny comes. So get used to it. And I didn't take him often, but a couple times I'd take my son in and he'd toddle around and see people. And so they knew that he was my priority. That was something I had to do. Um, I think the other element would be, let me pick one, coming back to Chicago. And as I mentioned, starting to do speaking, professional speaking through a speakers bureau. I had worked with a fabulous coach, Jill Wesley, who's in California, and I didn't see it coming. But as I wrote out and these speeches and practiced them, and because I'm so conscious of words, words carry energy. And this was new to me in terms of I'm talking to corporate organizations, trade associations, professional groups, that sort of. These are private events and the stakes are high. And this speakers bureau has some of the best of the best. And so it was a little intimidating, but I knew that if I was just honest and true to myself, it would work. And lo and behold, I got there right at the right time. We were coming out of COVID. Everybody was worried about the Great Resignation. Remember? It's kind
Yes.
of distant memory now, although it's I don't know, it's kind of coming back around in a different form. And so I was off to a great start. And in the last, it's been 3.5 years, I guess, that I've been working with them, well over 100 speeches. And I love doing it because I'm constantly upgrading new information, uploading in my own consciousness and awareness new information that I speak. And I never say the same exact speech twice. There's always something extemporaneous that comes to me that I want to share. So yeah,
You know, I first of all, totally hear you on the transitions of adult life, right?
yeah,
I love now that people are like, when you say how's it going, they're like, well, life is lifing, right?
yeah.
So the child, the broken marriage, the divorce, the new job, all of that. The thing you spoke about is what I call also alignment, right? And
Yes,
that is
I love that
something
word.
that I had to figure out too, is that to the extent that you are aligning these things, you're using less energy, or you're using your energy more effectively and efficiently because your life is lining up with your values and your purpose and your gifts, right? So that's actually quite I think an important thing for people to be thinking about.
Sure.
And it allows you to be steadfast with your priorities,
That's right.
right? And to
That was the word that's
communicate
come to my
those
mind.
to others.
Yeah,
Yes,
priorities.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not like, look, let me tell you, blah, blah, blah. It's more like,
Yeah.
this is who I am.
No
And
thanks.
if that doesn't work, then
Yeah,
we maybe need to do something else, but let's see if we can make it work, you
that's
know?
right. Yeah.
But the other thing that I really loved that you talked about is being on that stage and thinking about what you're saying so often
Mhm.
that you're finding like the inside, the term, the story, like the thing that will help you to connect what you're
That's
saying
right.
to your
That's
audience.
right.
And
Yes.
when it happens, I sometimes call it like the Jesus show when you
Oh,
talk
yeah.
that contemporary where you're like extemporaneously saying things that you hadn't practiced and it just kind of comes out and you're like, wow, that's really interesting.
That was pretty good. Where'd that come from?
I
Well,
like
now
that.
I can't
I
I
hope I
I
can
can't
remember.
I can't always claim responsibility because here's where some of that spirituality comes in. I'm
Yes.
never alone. And before I walk out on that stage, I'll kind of look up and around and say, okay, y'all, I know you're here with me. My angels and my guides. Dr. King
Yes.
is one of my guides. And so
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
always like, and I get readings from time to time, and he has shown up, and I meditate daily, and I hear him and
Yes.
others. So before I will always have a moment, and it's literally a moment, a few
Yes.
seconds of nervousness. They call your name, you're walking up to the stage, but just before that, I will have reconnected, reestablished the connection. It's always there, but my awareness becomes tuned to it. And then it's like I can't fail. Whatever comes is going to come. And then there are those moments where, I say something and I'm like, "Woo, thank you. That was really
Thank
good."
you, right? That's awesome. That was great. So let me ask you this. So tell us more, because you've alluded to it a couple of times. Let's tell us more about your spiritual journey and also tell us when as you're thinking about this, just sort of your background. Like, how did you get to this idea? You said like there was this very transformative situation where your dad passed, et cetera. But tell us a little bit about what spirituality means and how it infuses your work,
Mhm.
and then a little bit about your background and how that has also shaped your work.
I'll start there real quickly. I had two amazing parents. I was very fortunate. My mother was from Tuskegee, Alabama. Her father, my grandfather, walked from Georgia to Tuskegee to learn under Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, and became the first Black agent, field agent for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the ag school at Tuskegee is named after him. So a very educated background. He put all six kids through Tuskegee. One was a Tuskegee Airman. Another was a
Wow.
surgeon. Another was a surgical nurse, a dietitian. My mother was a physical therapist. My grandmother was a nurse. So very learned, accomplished Black family. Quite unusual in the Deep South in those days. But Tuskegee had that, back in the day, it really had that rich environment. My dad was from San Francisco, family of six. He was a pioneer in the realm of corrections. He was basically a prison warden, and one of the first black man to run up the ranks in the California system, and oversaw a number of facilities around the state. And we lived on one of them when I was very young, so that was a huge influence on me. Spiritually, I think both my parents, neither was particularly religious. We went to a Methodist church, we went to another, went to a Unitarian church. So religion wasn't sticky, but the notion of I came up during civil rights too, and they were very active. So there was an embedded spirituality there. There was a notion of unity, right? That's a spiritual concept. So there was a lot, and then I'm integrating both the unity and the leadership because both my parents demonstrated these leadership um, behaviors. My dad was a leader. He was an amazing leader. I watched how he respected people. I watched how he earned that, how he treated the inmates as well as his staff and the community members. And same with my mom. It was service oriented. And I watched her go to some of her patients' homes on her own time to check on them. So I had this rich example of what it meant to be in service to others. and to lead. And so that was the spiritual piece was not expressly articulated, but in hindsight, I'm aware because spirituality wasn't necessarily a word. My mother used to love to read Howard Thurman's books
Oh,
and knew
wow.
him from Tuskegee days. Not a big deal, at home, wasn't forcing the stuff on anybody, but it was an awareness. And so for me, I explored different religions, and then finally, when I met Kurt Hill, who's here in Chicago, and he is a master healer shaman. He's got a master's in divinity from the University of Chicago, a master's in psychology from the Adler School. So this brother is indeed a scholar and a brilliant and a close personal friend and guide to me. So that happened just after my father passed away, and he was around after my mother transitioned, and I still see him almost weekly.
Mhm.
So I've had in my parents' absence, I've had someone who has been able to. He doesn't. It's not a parenting figure as much as just a solid person that I can um, rely on for comfort, advice, all those things.
It's so important, and thank you for sharing that, and wow, just so great to hear about that parentage, that's special,
Yeah,
especially
it
when you
is.
have parents who model what they say, they just don't say it, right? And they may not even mention it, but you can watch it and you can see it, and the standard for you is just very high, right?
Right.
And I think, we all know in the workplace that we encounter some people who don't have that awareness or they don't have those models. And of course, I think when you're talking about conscious leadership, you're looking for leaders who are going to model some of that
Yes.
behavior.
Yes.
And I want to hear more about that. And I also really love that your story is suggesting that all of us need support and all of us need someone who is for us and who is grounded, and not all of us are as maybe lucky as having this personal guide, but just knowing that that's so important, especially as we get older, right?
Yes.
And we try to make sense out of things and we try to also make our lives make sense. So thank you for sharing
And
that.
be the model for our offspring,
Other,
right?
yes,
For our
yes.
children.
Ooh, and that is not easy.
I know you know.
You know, we both know, like, trying to be that being the thing that you say that you are is by far like a lifelong kind of work. Yeah, because you start to the more conscious you get, the more you realize, "Oh, so you have that issue. You're gonna need to work on that."
Yeah.
But but the other thing that I was really fascinated by is, um, how you define conscious leadership.
So a couple quick points of intersection. When I got to Spencer Stewart in the early days, just literally the first couple of months, I was initially a little intimidated. It was in my 30s, and I was going to be meeting all these captains of industry, interviewing them and assessing them, right? They're sitting across the table from me, and I've got the upper hand trying to understand who they are. And I started interviewing when I kind of walked away after a couple months, maybe a dozen interviews, and I kind of went, "That's it." I wasn't always that impressed, and then I met somebody who really impressed me, and I thought, well, what did he have? And it hit me. It was self awareness, and then I began to sort of make these connections about consciousness is awareness, um, and there are many levels of it. So starting with yourself, so how well do you know yourself? When I was 12, I stared into the mirror at my little vanity for like what felt like an eternity. It was maybe 5 minutes, but I kept looking deeper inside my eye, inside my eye, inside my eye. And it helped me to understand that I wasn't alone, that I was part of something bigger. And so I think if you can go from that level of self-awareness, I see myself, I love myself, I accept myself for who I am. I'm not done. I'm a dynamic entity. Now you're starting to open yourself up to being conscious. And as I've watched leaders, and Google was a great place for me because as an executive recruiter, I was an agent. I was moving in and out across a lot of different companies, but being in house in one of them, and mind you, I'd worked in other companies, but that was before I became a recruiter. Now I got to see a variety at a scale that was powerful. Some were good, some not so good. But one of the, again, from a recruiting lens, what's the criterion? against which you're selecting these people, right? On what basis are they being hired? And it was clear to me that a lot of it had to do with pedigree. A lot of it was relationships. The pedigree was around which schools did you go to, which companies did you use to work for, all this stuff. And that flew in the face of all the training I had. Sure, we all have our biases and we love looking at a resume that has all these recognizable schools and the degrees, and that's important. But I learned that there is little to no correlation between those credentials and one's actual level of competence. And that's where I'd known that for a while, but going to Google really amplified it because, and I'm not coming down on them. They're like 90% of all the other companies, and many of those companies aspire to be like them and are emulating their practices. But when it comes to hiring, I feel so strongly, and this gets into a diversity consideration, right? I just spoke to a group of a board of a software company last week, and I was talking about diversity, sort of in passing. It was a small topic in the grander scheme of things. And one of the people asking questions like, "Well, I don't want to have to lower the standards." And I said, "I never said diversity was about lowering the standard. And the people that I, put forth for consideration anywhere I've ever been have been more qualified in some cases." So what you're talking about, it might be affirmative action, and that was 50 years ago. So what I wanted to say was I was being gracious. I wanted to say, check your biases, person.
For real. For
Okay,
real.
because this no one said anything about qualifications except when we started
Yeah,
talking
so,
about
yeah, why
diversity.
did you go there?
Right.
Like, what made you go there,
Yep.
right?
Your
And I
biases.
agree with you. So many of those traditional criteria are blind people to what is true talent and what are the competencies that would
That's
make a
right.
difference in this particular role.
Yes, sir.
And they get repeated over and over again from institution to institution, just like you said. So there's no wonder that the representation of certain groups of people are much lower
Yeah.
because either they were not afforded some
Mhm.
of the entree into some of those particular traditional criterion
Mhm.
institutions, or they don't have that veneer,
Veneer,
right, that
it is,
people
yeah.
associate
Yep.
with competency. Associate,
Yeah,
it's like a very loose association, right?
totally.
And so therefore, they interview people, but they don't really interview
They're
people.
not asking competency-based questions, Renee. Yeah, it's like, "Here, can I give you" this is what I was telling these people, and they were like, "Ooh, writing down notes." I'm thinking, "How many people have you all interviewed and selected the wrong people?" It's easy, and I make a distinction between functional competencies. You can be a domain expert, you can know a whole lot about something, that's great. It has little to nothing to do with how good of a leader you're going to be. There are leadership competencies, and those were the ones that I am expert in assessing. I can understand some functional stuff too, cutting across a lot of the stuff that I financial services, professional services, I've seen a lot of other elements. But the way you interview competencies, two definitions. People say they're skills. They are skills plus knowledge plus ability. Someone can teach you how to do a spreadsheet, run a machine, do whatever, but do you have the knowledge of the system in which you're a part? And do you have the ability, mental, physical, emotional ability to do it in the way that needs to be done in the moment? And we're in a mental health crisis. So there are a lot of people whose competence might be temporarily impaired. And we need to understand that to the extent that they're going through something. All right. So that's one definition around a competency. The other one
Yes.
is mine, and that is they're the deconstructed elements of how you do something. I don't care that you've done it before, you could have done it poorly. And a lot of people have. Okay.
Oh
So
my god, that's so good. I don't care if you did it before, how well did you do it?
that's it. That's what I want to know. The question becomes, so here are my three questions. How did you do XYZ? How? Tell me how. There are and no yes no questions. All right. Oh, have you done that? Yes, no, no. Not have you. Tell me how you did it. The other one would be to offer up a hypothetical situation. Here's a hypothetical. What would you do in this scenario? Okay. Um, and the other would be simply give me an example. Give me an example and tell me how. Those three things, you're going to get some answers that are going to give you some insight into how this person thinks, which is all I care about. Because I've seen people who've crossed different functions successfully because of how they think. They know how to adapt and adjust their competence which has been disassociated from the function itself, to be able to deploy it in a different function, different sector. So we got to start rethinking this.
We must. And I one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, you've been inside, you've been outside. I
Yeah.
mean, you're outside now, and then you've been inside with Google, and then you were kind of like a third party kind of connector when you were executive recruiting. So which do you like the most? And what did you learn from being in those different roles?
I love where I am right now, working for myself. But I'm someone who I'm highly adaptable. So I loved where I was in the past because I always learned something. Now, some days were better than others. Some systems and entities had better cultures than others. But I'm also someone who I believe that I have the ability to create a lot of my own um, infrastructure and environment. I have more impact, which is part of the message I'm trying to offer a lot of people. Because when I'm talking about leadership, I'm not just talking about people in leadership roles, because a lot of those people aren't leaders in my view. They lack integrity. They lack a lot of the things that we've acknowledged. They lacked empathy and consciousness and awareness, and these other things that make for a leader. And we've got 95% of the workforce. The other, call it 5%. That's my round number of people who are in leadership roles. The other 95 are somewhat beholden to them. What they don't realize is how much impact and agency they have on affecting change inside of these organizations. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about, and I'll be offering courses around that as well.
So you said you kind of like you learned from
Everything.
every
So I
role.
decided not to
Uh,
decide to answer your question.
yes, yes, yes. But you love this role the most.
Yeah, I do. It's because I've earned it, and it's been hard won and hard fought. And because I feel as though I'm of service in a way that I couldn't have been earlier in my career. I have wisdom now. I have insight. I have fearlessness. And it's those things that allow me to offer people um, a safe place, help them make sense of where they are and say, oh, no, no, that's not okay, what you're going through. It is not. And here are some options of what you can be doing and how you can be thinking and fortifying yourself, expanding your consciousness, tapping in and understanding that you're not alone. Right. So that's what some of
Yeah.
that spirituality comes in.
Yeah. So you have these 5 dimensions of leadership, and I want to hear about that and like how that came to be
Yeah.
in your mind in your brilliant mind.
Um, when I was at Google in my last year there, one of my team members and I talk about brilliant. This guy was brilliant, Jackson. And he said, you should do a podcast. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should. Well, actually, there was somebody else who had a couple of other women within Google who had urged me to do it as well. But Jackson was my thought partner on it. And we came up with a title for it. And it's called Fifth Dimensional Leadership. We're not currently in production, but I have 80 something episodes that are sitting on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. They're there and accessible. And the fifth dimension is we live in the third. Most people do, at least. I kind of live in the fifth just because I've pushed the limits. But that's where it's unity consciousness. You are able to tap in. It's love based. It's soul based. So it's not about the separation that we're seeing in this world. So that was the name of it. And then I thought, well, 5 dimensions. What if I came up with 5 dimensions that really help explain what I think make for a great leader? And so they are know yourself, self awareness, speak your truth. Similar to what I was saying about how I found that the speaking exercise being so powerful once I understood who I am, now I can say it and put energy out into the world. Inspire love, and the inspired love is part of it is starting with the self love. You got to love yourself before you can truly love someone else, and that belongs in the workplace because that's the catalyst for empathy, right? Um, Expand consciousness. So once you do this, you become more aware. As you put loving energy out there, you become more aware. And the last one is activate mastery. And it's a spiral, Vernā. You never stop. You don't just,
Exactly.
it's not this, it's this. You keep, I want to believe it's an ascension to your greatest awareness. So that's what they are. And they reference To me, that's the essence of leadership. You got to know who you are before I'm going to care about what you can do. Because if you don't know those things, there are limits on your abilities of what you can accomplish and how you can impact others.
And you know, it's interesting because what I've also discovered is this whole love yourself is there are a lot of people who do not love themselves.
A lot.
And the outgrowth of that, first of all, is very sad for them, but it's also very sad for the people who have to work with them because
Totally.
often they are acting out
Yeah.
of their self loathing, their lack of confidence, their insecurities. And that's where you start to see this destructive competition. You know, there's an enormous amount of energy expended on the team of people being so either upset or not understanding how they can succeed. It just has such a ripple effect, just like love, right?
That's
Love
right.
has a very powerful ripple effect upward. And
Yes.
this like self-loathing and this kind of fear
Mhm.
really can contaminate.
Oh, it creates a toxic culture.
Exactly.
Toxic.
So, okay, so tell me, how do you define inclusive culture? And there's one other thing I want to go back to, which is unity, because unity is, to me, you and I say unity, and I think we know exactly what we're talking about. But I
Mhm.
also recognize that in a lot of professional spaces, there
Mhm.
isn't this understanding
Mhm.
about unity. So, when you
No.
say an inclusive culture, what does that look like for you? And then tell us a little bit more about what you mean by unity.
Yeah. And they're related, obviously, right? So inclusive to me means I shouldn't have to ask to be brought into this discussion. It's as a practical matter, right? Um, I'm here because I'm qualified. Not everybody can say that. Some of my peers couldn't say that in some of the circles I was in. Okay. It was because they knew somebody, whatever the other reason. But inclusive means, and a leader who really is oriented this way, this is indeed a leadership competency, builds inclusive teams. And that has to be modeled. So that means that this individual is able to I don't know that we're all without bias. I think we all have biases that come and go that are influenced by whatever. But at least a great leader is able to suspend their biases to be able to identify great talent and contextualize and build a container within which people can operate and be their best. That's what it means to
Yes.
be inclusive to me. So there's so much more I could say, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does unity fit in?
The unity part, well, we know the word, the essence is one. So it's to me, it goes back to a simple belief: we're all one. We're all human beings. I care enough about you that I'm going to protect you and me. Right? You're doing what's in the interest of most, if not all. And that is one of the prerequisites to me of being a great leader. You're not leading because it's your ego. You lead because you have skills that are bringing forth products, services, the careers of people that are going to benefit others. There's a selflessness to this. So that's what unity is.
I hear you, and one of the things that I see breaking up teams or causing teams to have less efficacy is because people are acting like they're not one team, or they're not one company, or they're not one group of humans,
Yeah, but
yeah?
that's not us. Yeah. It's like, well, what happened? How did we get here? I'm not
All the
we don't even know the
siloing,
answer. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's sort of like, "You guys, you gotta develop this whole idea," and one of the things that I also recognize is that the love and the compassion is so necessary
It
right
is.
now for all the reasons you already said. I mean, we've got some difficult problems to
Mhm.
solve, right?
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
also have people who have like their mental health is really not what it needs to be in order to
Mhm.
be and some of these pressure cooking environments where
Mhm.
so much is asked and so little is afforded,
Yeah.
and so when you love and you are selfless, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean you don't have make mistakes, and like you
Nope.
said, it doesn't mean that you don't have biases.
Yeah.
It's that you love yourself and you love your team enough to be like, ooh, I think that was a bias. Let me see if I can back up, or let me lean into this thing that feels like conflict. But if I can suspend my ego for a minute,
That's right. That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Then I could actually see where the 2 of us are connected or the,
Mhm.
more than 2 of us are
And
connected and
I
trying
don't
to
even
bring.
have to like you. I don't even have to like you. My mother always made a big distinction, because she was like, "Look, I love you unconditionally. I don't always like what you do. I
Right.
don't always like how
Right,
you
and we don't
showing
have to
up."
be friends to treat each other with dignity, like, we
Thank
don't
you.
have to.
Thank you. Thank you. I coach a number of people, and some of a couple of more mid-level folks. Typically, it's more senior, but as a favor to someone that I've worked with, and I'm telling them because they're feeling very disconnected and very almost fragile. Like, well, if these things don't work out for me, then what am I going to do? And it's like, actually, they probably won't work out. So now what? But you've got all this skill, all this knowledge, all this awareness, and you can self validate. You don't need some of these organizations, many of which are dysfunctional, okay, to validate you. So, how about you love on yourself? How about you join an ERG? How about you look in someone's eyes as you see them in the hallway and smile? I mean, we just have lost our human connectivity.
There is something so precious about who we are as human beings, and we must find it. We
Yes,
must reconnect, and we need to see that we're all part of each other's success.
yes,
And this, I wanted you to give some advice in particular to those who, I was going to say younger people, but it's not just younger people.
yeah,
There are people in every generation who are feeling that lack of self agency. There's a lot of hopelessness. There's a lot of woe is me. So
yeah.
there's like, right? There's the trauma. There are so many things. And then, of course,
Mhm.
there are all the institutional barriers that shouldn't even be there.
Yep.
What do you tell people who are struggling about, how they get into a different mindset that would allow them to actually succeed on their own terms?
Right. Get professional help if that's what you need. Not everybody needs it. At least start by some practices, some ritual. As I said, I meditate every morning. I wake up, like it or not. I don't even set an alarm, but my body clock, I wake up between 4 and 4:30 every single morning. Sometimes I'll just kind of like, let me go back to sleep. And no, 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 get up. So it's fine.
Wow.
Yeah. But
4:30, that's early.
it's
I wanna
early.
do 4:30. I never get to 4, well, maybe if I'm on a
You're
pla
catching a
gotta catch a
flight
plane.
probably, right. But develop some practices which allow you to feel sensations of calm because we are so hyped up and so many people don't even breathe out enough. They're just breathing in all the time. I've seen it. And I've seen the knee under the table that's like, jigging. Uh, That's anxiety. And get a practice, work out, do breathing techniques. There's stuff on YouTube, doesn't have to cost a thing. Meditate for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That's what I do, sometimes twice a day. So find some calm, find your own way to heal. Read some things, right? I've read tons of spiritual and metaphysical books. So be curious and separate this thing that you do from everything else and everyone else in your world. It's yours and yours alone. And this is where you get to call in your angels and guides to be with you and feel that sensation. We don't have time, but I have felt the presence of my grandfather and my parents and others. Um, and there's so much power in that. Having that consciousness can allow you to find such a level of peace and awareness and insight because again our thoughts we kind of want to take credit for everything we think. Sometimes there's, like I mentioned, when I'm going on stage and that thing comes in, I know that wasn't mine, but I'm a vessel through which goodness flows. And so if I affirm that and know that and live that, then I stay strong and my strength radiates out and hopefully can inspire others.
Exactly, and also, I sometimes I am talking to folks who are angry and mad, and I totally get it.
I get it.
However, there is a way in which they're talking to themselves that is disempowering.
That's it. That you said the word. I was just thinking they're giving away their power. They're investing too much. They're giving too much credit to these people. I'm like, don't you realize half these people are doing what they're told? They're not even thinking. You, on the other hand, are in it. You're invested. You're committed. And you don't like what's going on? Say something. fix the system. You don't have to tear it down to fix it.
So yeah, I'd love to hear what are some of the ways because you're right. Some people are like, "Oh, it's them." They're pointing up. They don't even know what who the
Yeah,
them is, but
yeah,
we all can make a difference, and like
yeah,
you said, we all can be leaders. So, what can people do who feel like they don't really have the title or they don't have like the power invested in them as
yeah.
such? Because they're real power differences, no
Oh,
lie.
it's real. I
But
get it. Yeah.
they're real. But what can we each do to create more of an inclusive and conscious culture, wherever we are and on whatever level we're
Yeah,
on?
it's not trite to say speak truth to power. And that's why the second dimension after knowing yourself is speak your truth. You got to say something. You got to let people know where your boundaries are, what you're committed to. And it's easy for us to say as we're seasoned execs um, who work for ourselves now, but vote with your feet. And I hear people, I'll say some things like this on social media. People are like, well, you don't understand. I got bills to pay. I get that. I was a single mom. I had bills to pay too. But you don't have to stay where you are being traumatized. And there are workplaces that are that toxic out there. You can find another job. Might take you a minute, but don't stay there. Stop subjecting yourself to harm and mental and sometimes physical abuse. So let's get out of that mindset and start believing so much of it is our orientation that we are subject to the whims of these folks who are in these leadership roles. Don't give them that power. You can be gracious, you can be respectful, but set boundaries. And someone said, well, I'm going to get fired. Good. Then get fired and go find yourself a job that is with an employer who is worthy of you. But it means that you love yourself enough to go find that employer.
Yes, and you think you're worthy. You
You're
know
worthy.
you're worthy,
That's
that
right.
you deserve better. If you
Yes,
don't know you deserve better, you're not gonna go try to get better,
that's
and
right.
I think that, we have some of us are struggling to believe that we deserve the best, and I think that's just a function of being a human being. Like,
It
you
is.
deserve to be treated well,
Yeah.
to be compensated well, to be, given an opportunity to
Yep.
share what you're capable of, like, those are just basics, and if you're
Mhm.
not getting those things, you gotta check yourself, you gotta figure out what you're
Yeah.
doing and not doing,
Yeah,
but
what's your role in
yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but, here's the thing also that I was thinking about was, you're on that stage, you've got truth, but you happen to be standing in front of a bunch of folks who are not oriented in
Mhm,
this way. How do
mhm.
you decide what to say and what not to say in front of some of these audiences that actually don't know how to deal with the word love or
Mhm.
compassion or whatever? Like, what do you choose to say and not say in those environments, just strategically?
Yeah. Um, I don't change much. As you said earlier on, I'm standing there, I'm feeling the energy from the crowd. I was once talking to a huge global law firm, that asked me to talk about the 5 dimensions of leadership. And I could look in the faces of some of these people when I started, and they were like, "Oh, geez, seriously?" By the time we finished, some of them were in tears. So I knew that they didn't know what I was coming with. The language, and that's I have a gift that of language. I know a lot of words. I have a big vocabulary because literally used to flip through the dictionary for fun. And so I'm conscious of subtle changes in language that I might offer, but my thesis is always clear and it's penetrating in a way that it's okay if you're not smiling when you leave. I don't need affirmation from everyone in the audience, but I'm fully aware of the fact that I didn't blow my speech. That I left, I was speaking to a bank and I know they invited me to come back a year later. This is a big old bank based in the South. And I thought, looking out at them, I could have been like, oh, I don't know how that landed. I wasn't worried how it landed because I knew that my message has so many layers to it that depending on where you vibrate, if you're down here, you probably heard something that made you a little uncomfortable. If you're up here where I am, you resonated completely. And then there's everybody in between. And I'm talking about frequencies because we all operate at that's the metaphysical stuff that I'm going into. But
Exactly.
that's where we're connecting. The words carry the frequency, and my intention is part of how it lands. So I'm intentional about that. people are gonna take it as best they can because my intention is with love.
That is so powerful. The intention is with love, and not everybody can say that.
No.
Not everybody. So watch your intentions, people. Like, what are you coming with, and what are you trying to achieve with your words? Because that's an important uh that's important for us to decide, and it also makes a difference on how what we say is accepted or not
Precisely.
accepted. And I watch, especially people of color and those who are from like historically marginalized and backgrounds.
Mhm.
I've watched them turn themselves inside out,
Oh, I know, it's painful.
keep themselves quiet when they
No,
should speak up, right? Do this, all this covering and all of this like code switching. And hey, look, strategically, depending on where you are and who you're talking to, you got to do a little of that.
of
But if that's
course,
what you're
everybody
doing
does.
all the time,
Not at the
every
expense of
day,
their health and well-being, and a lot of people are. They're angry, they're bitter, and if you don't think that affects your physical and mental health, you're nuts. It absolutely does. It's the first thing that does, and you going back
everyone
into that
around
environment.
you.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and everyone around you, like, it's leaking out to your children, it's
Totally.
leaking out to your partners. Yeah, yeah, and we have more power than that.
We do.
So, I wanna there's a question that I mean, I could talk to you forever, but, we'll just have to talk offline. But one of the things I try to ask everyone this nowadays, on the podcast is what have you changed your mind about recently?
Recently. That's a tough question. What have I changed my mind about recently? Um,
Or maybe you see it differently?
yeah, I think it's really around as I'm observing the United States in particular, I'm I'm more optimistic in spite of what feels really uncomfortable, the divisiveness. I don't look at just what is. I look beyond that to and I'm not big into astrology or anything other than my meditation is my form of that. But I think we had to reach and we're about to approach that defining moment like I did in my life when my dad died, where it changed everything. I think we are on the precipice of that as a civilization. And so we are having our own reckoning as human beings, and AI is staring us down. We better rise up, right? As humans and tap into all of who we can be to create something that's good for all. And I'm not saying AI is bad. That it's going to
Right.
include AI, but how about we perfect or at least seek to enhance ourselves and our humanness and our ability to love one another and connect with one another. That's the game. If y'all watch The Matrix, that's one of my favorite movies. That's what remember the Oracle, the black woman, the Oracle. Watch the
Yeah,
movie, get her message.
for
That's
real,
that's what
because
we have to do.
yeah, either with AI, either we're gonna be better humans
Yep.
or we're gonna be worse, right? Either
Yeah.
we're gonna think about how to use this technology on behalf of other people and
Yep.
to see the unity between us, or we are gonna spiral into more separation and more taking advantage of
Destructive. Yeah.
certain people. So we gotta get the direction right. Okay,
Yeah.
2 more questions. One
Sure.
is, there's some brilliant person out there listening to this and thinking, "I should start my own company. I know I have what it takes." Any advice for them? Any encouragement for them?
Yeah. Know what you're good at. I just did a one of my YouTube videos on pivoting. So for folks, the first one was on are you going back to school? Or are you starting a business? So understand what you're actually good at before it's not because that's not enough. It's my point. You can be one of those domain experts and know everything there is to know about whatever. But if you don't know how to run a business, it's going to cost you, right? There are costs associated with getting the infrastructure, the people, the services that are going to allow the business to grow and thrive and scale. So understand those things first. Talk to a lot of people. Ask yourself a lot of questions. Get feedback on you and what you're good at. And if that's your passion, if that's what's driving you, then go do it. But have purpose behind it.
And Jenny, you did a lot of interviewing and a lot of headhunting.
Yeah,
I'm going for a job. I'm
yeah,
looking for a job. I want to interview the company to see
Yes.
if this is the place I want to be. What
Yes.
should I be asking? What should I be looking for in an inclusive culture?
Yeah. It's always hard because, the organization, the recruiter, whoever, a hiring manager is going to sort of prescribe how many people you get to talk to. But herein lies the benefit of having a robust network so that you, whether it's through LinkedIn or your alumni, whatever, I've done videos and my book talks about all those people who should be in your network. So get third party references, as we used to call them, on people. Do that for organizations. Talk to people who work there, who know somebody who's worked there, because you could be talking to a great leader who is creates a very nice little microculture, and that would be great. Or conversely, someone who's not a good leader, but you kind of need to know that. But ask questions about, tell me about some of your policies, and practices around how do you determine promotion. What are the incentive structure associated with that? When do you get compensated? What are the performance evaluations? What are the factors that build into that? Can you describe that for me? And if not, can I talk to somebody in HR who could break that down for me so that I understand? What are your retention rates of people from underrepresented backgrounds? Ask them that. That'll mess them up because most of them probably aren't going to know.
Like,
But
oh,
well, but they need to know, and they can say, when I was talking to Google, they called me because they wanted to do better, with regard to representation at the senior levels. So I knew what the premise was, and I knew how to fix it. The question became, are you ready to do what I'm telling you to do? Right?
so true.
So,
So
yeah,
true.
yeah.
Well, you said you're optimistic about the future. So tell me what inspires you and what are you excited about?
I have to hold a vision because if I don't, then then who will? I mean, because if I just listen to the news all day, if that's a steady diet of this very often negative stuff that we're hearing about, you can and that's that energy again, it's weakening your immune system, it weakens your state of mind, your well-being. So choose carefully. My optimism is high because I do think that deep down we are decent people, decent humans who want to connect to others. We want that. We've learned to carry hate. That's a learned behavior. Our natural state is to love. And so I want us to get back to that. And I'm inspired by all my ancestors and guides. And I think that more people, if they were really honest with themselves, want that too. They actually do. So if we can lock arms and put aside any differences because they're inconsequential when it comes down to it. Level and title and wealth and all these things that we constantly in the news, well, people at this level and people, I don't care. We're human and we need to start showing one another decency and love and empathy and kindness.
If we can do that, then we can eliminate some of those things that situate us
That's right.
differently and better in some cases and not so great in other cases. We would work on that together,
Yeah.
right? And if we could feel that, if we could see it. Okay, what project you got going that you're excited about right now? Anything that you
Um, a new book. So I just signed with United Talent Agency (UTA) for them to represent
Yes.
me on a new leadership book. So I'm busy working on that proposal. Courses. I'm working with a marketing team. We've done a deep dive into everything I talk about, think about, to offer some leadership courses. Again, all levels. This isn't just at the leadership level. This is for aspiring leaders as well, and that will include the five pillars, the five dimensions of consciousness. Um, that's enough. I still do the
That's a
speaking. I still do
lot.
coaching. Yeah.
That's a
So
lot.
yeah,
So where can people find you? Give me all of the places where people can
easy.
find your great stuff.
Yeah, thank you. GinnyClarke.com. You see my name here. That's just that.com. YouTube channel, which is called Fifth Dimensional Leadership. Um, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook.
For
Leads
people
on
who are
TikTok.
just listening, it's Ginny, and then
Yes.
Clark has an E at the end.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
thank you so much, Jenny. It's been a pleasure to hear from you and all your wisdom and all of the ways in which you are being an incredible leader in this space. Thank you,
Um,
thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Just love you dearly and so honored to be part of this with you. And, you're one of those people I'm locking arms with, honey, because we got work to do.
Yes, we got
Yeah.
to do it in community. Yes, not by ourselves.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow me at Vernay Myers on Instagram and Twitter You can also listen to my podcast on Spotify and Apple Music. Subscribe to my channel and share this episode with someone who is going to join us in this space. Make sure to visit my website for DEI resources and online learning courses at vernamyers.com, and make sure you sign up for my newsletter to stay in touch with me. Thank you again for listening, and see you next time for more Sundays with Vernā.